thank you. Can you hear me okay? Yeah? Score. So real quick, actually, who is here to learn how to teach people how to code? Or, oh, wow, that is awesome. And how about who is like learning how to code still, maybe? Yeah, that's still me. It's okay. And how about who kind of feels like they're drowning? Me? Oh, come on, we're friends, please. Okay, it's okay. It's okay, because, let's see if I get this correct, I will be your lifeguard on duty. Come on, laugh, come on. No, I'm legitimately like a certified swim coach, so it's kind of funny. But I am Lynn Root. I am an engineer at Red Hat. I am Rogue Lynn on the interwebs, except for my GitHub account. It's econchick. Don't ask me why. All right, so why am I here? I'm here, I want to take a look at how we traditionally learn computer science, and I want to sort of change how we should learn computer science, and I'm going to leave you with something to learn and teach with. All right, who's ready? I am. All right, so to start off, if we take a look at the amount of online schools like Codecademy or Udacity or Coursera, or maybe the brick and mortar schools like Hackbright, who's here from Hackbright? Yeah. Hacker School and Dev Bootcamp, or perhaps the many like failing tech IPOs that we see, computer science is definitely having its 15 minutes of fame. And so if you look at the growth in terms of jobs and earnings, it's not too far from Moore's Law itself. But in the context of history, it seems like software engineering is merely going through like its industrial phase compared to other engineering fields. There isn't a revolutionary way to build a bridge or a highway. We've perfected the assembly line, and building like a guitar or a violin is now more of an art rather than a science. Yet we're still arguing how best to code, or how best to swim, if you will. Should we stop writing classes, or should we write more classes? We're rapidly developing new languages like Topaz Ruby on PyPy, or perfecting our current ones. Perhaps textbooks and a classroom is fine for learning for more established engineering fields like architecture or manufacturing. But with the revolutionary pace of software development, how best should we teach its principles? A four-year degree does not grant you elite status, unfortunately, certainly not by researchers' standards. There's a dude, a professor at the University of Dayton, Ohio, that actually asked this question: can we turn novice programmers into experts in 4 years? And as this quote alludes, not really, it takes about 10 years. It's kind of a familiar notion. So in my experience, there's one predominant theme that I'm seeing, is a gap between blowing bubbles and learning how to swim more than a few laps. So you went through Learn Python the hard way, but like now what? A for loop is easy to identify and to code exactly when told what to do, but that's not real life. There's plenty of debate about how to go about learning how to code. One major underlying theme about what I've read and experienced is this notion of concepts for granted versus concepts for context. And what I mean by that is there's this thought that we're less likely to develop an advanced understanding of what we're trying to master than if we were searching for an underlying meaning, trying to integrate the newly learned concepts into what we already know. Learning from lectures and textbooks will only go so far. With typical formal education, one learns that certain computer concepts exist, like how to compile and install an operating system, or perhaps go deeper in how that works. But that doesn't bridge outside of those concepts to understand its application, or how the whole works together with its parts. We need something to create those connections outside of those isolated concepts. So rather than episodic learning, where the guppy accumulates unconnected facts, we need to learn cumulatively, where the discovery is more organized, in order to build ourselves context while learning. We construct our learning rather than simply listen and regurgitate what is taught. So how best can we apply that to learning how to code? So myself, I say project-based learning. I started off blowing bubbles, as we all do. I did take one course in computer science after I graduated with an econ degree. I would have failed if it weren't for my crappy little project shattering the fact that I couldn't code. But I loved it. The cold, chilly 3 a.m. water never felt better to me. But I did not want to pay another $2,000 for a single course whose credit won't necessarily apply towards anything. I was drowning from being told this is how we chlorinate the water, to here are the hydrodynamic equations that your body must follow in order to swim fast. So I ditched traditional academia, and I began to learn how to code through projects. It was a self-directed study with the motivation to actually do this for a living. And it's paid off. Within a year, I am now a software engineer at Red Hat. Woo! Granted, I still choke on water every once in a while, but I took to the water myself after studying what others do, how they code, and then teaching others myself. I've certainly belly flopped through a few times. I tend to find myself learning more through frustration than being told what to do or how to do it. It usually ends in success, but not without tears and wasted time. And it may not be the best way to go about to learn, but it certainly challenges me to push myself through the hard times. It sort of builds up my endurance for longer races. But I see myself in a good position to teach what I've learned. I'm no Olympic swimmer. I still have those fresh noob eyes when trying to understand a new code base. Yet, when I try to explain to someone else, concepts do solidify. Teaching others gives me that personal meaning and that understanding, since I want to create that context that builds that cumulative learning for others. So I sort of want to pass on that frustration. In an effort to further my understanding, I am here as your coach to give you 5 swim lessons. I've written 5 tutorials, and technically only 3 are complete. The other 2 have been coded out. It's called conference-driven development, I'm sorry. So the other 2 have been coded out, but it just needs the tutorial language behind it. And these are meant to build on each other, to thread the concepts for context for the new guppy in the water, but also be digestible and not overwhelming. The tutorials aim to pick up where introductory or outdated tutorials leave off with fun projects. You will learn how to tread water by playing water polo, not by someone dictating to move your arms and legs back and forth. So each tutorial has a purpose and a set of goals, ends on how these projects are used in real life, and where to explore afterwards in case the new coder wants to learn more in depth. There's some subtlety baked in, though, in particular the language used and how the topics are presented. I've written each tutorial with a set of side effects in mind, sort of indirect learning, if you will, that will eventually become the goals of future tutorials. So perhaps we play water polo by treading water, but it also builds endurance and strength, like indirectly. So knowledge is actively constructed by a student, not passively absorbed from textbooks and lectures. I want these guppies to learn by doing. We can't read how to swim. You have to feel the water against your hands in order to learn how to paddle through. You must accidentally snort up some water in order to learn how to breathe. We've all done that, right? So as a new coder dives into a tutorial, he or she will be exposed to what Pythonic means by learning how to construct proper import statements in the proper order, how to write legible docstrings and comments, and the language's keywords when exploring file input and output. He or she will work through third-party packages to get a soft introduction what it means to interact with a RESTful API, how to parse that data that's returned back from that API with different data structures. The terminology of object-oriented programming are introduced when instantiating classes and calling methods versus functions. And each tutorial has the same goal of developing one's logic and approaching a problem through organization, reading others' codes, debugging, testing, and logging. I've tried to write these in a way that to address any stupid or naive questions by using sidebars or gently introducing new terminology. So the difference between docstrings and comments might be obvious to some people, but not all, especially when starting out. So to build that constructive learning, I use this if you're curious sidebars. Of course you're curious, you're a new coder. It's just a bit of positive language to entice folks to read a bit more advanced topics to push their endurance. So as more advanced topics are introduced through these sidebars, they're not meant to pressure anyone to read through them. You can take a break and catch your breath. But they are guided to find out more information in case they want to dive deeper. So if he or she skips or does not understand fully, that's fine. The tutorial can be completed with full understanding of the goals, and the curious concepts will be explored in future tutorials. So many times, we're given a project in school, and we wonder, what good is this? Is this ever used in real life? Or am I ever going to compete in the state championships? The application of a project is the pitfall for a lot of folks. It can be discouraging to learn how to swim without a realm to show off one's skills. So I include an in-action conclusion with how each project is used in the industry now. So these are not meaningless exercises to learn data structures or how to graph with matplotlib. These tutorials use the learning of data structures to build these tools that are being used in real life. And lastly, one main critique that for new coders is, where do I go from here after completing how-to guides or tutorials? I made it to state championships, is that all? So it's extremely difficult to learn what you need to learn, yet not know what should be learned. So to encourage our new flying fish, each tutorial ends with guidance on where to go from the end, including on how to build upon what was just coded out, and resources on the topics covered. So you might be asking, what are these tutorials? The swim lessons. So the first one is a data visualization tutorial. While creating some graphs and plotting on Google Maps, the purpose for the new coder is to understand how to run a Python file from the command line, how to import a Python file, and to take raw data, parse its data with Python's data structures. The side effects, if you're curious, is to get familiar with importing Python standard library versus a self-written module versus third-party packages, and a little introduction on licensing and copyrights in open source. And then some file input and output, iterators and generators, global variables, docstrings, and list comprehensions. The second tutorial actually builds upon the first one, using techniques to grab data grabbed from a public API and graph them. So the project is actually to fetch video game platform information from a website, combine that with CPI inflation data to adjust the value of the US dollar over time and generate a bar graph to show its price development. So the goals are to solidify how to build a simple graph in matplotlib and to really understand file input and output, to interact with a public API using REST, and to parse command line arguments. And the little side effects are to learn the difference between Python 2 and Python 3's print keyword/function, and logging and validating data. The third one, secretly might be my favorite one, is a web scraping tutorial, where it shows that folks are able to grab data without the use of a public API. The project builds a web scraper using scraping to scroll through living social deals and save local deals to Postgres. And it also includes a little how-to on cron jobs, so folks can run this script daily. So rather than those annoying emails, you can query the database when you actually want a deal on skydiving or hot yoga. I think that's pretty cool. So the goals of this particular tutorial is to develop an understanding of Python classes and inheritance, Python's generators and iterators, and reading and writing to the database. And the subtle concepts are using an ORM, import star and why that's bad, and making a portable application. What's great about this tutorial is that if folks have already gone through the Django tutorial, the models should be familiar or would be a good primer to move on to Django. And as a means for inspiration and to build a little bit of personal context, the project finishes with a story of how one gal was able to actually continually scrape the London Olympics website in order to grab a ticket to the gymnastics final, which is really cool. Since Scrapey makes use of Twisted, that creates a familiar ground with moving on to the next tutorial. And I just had to make the next tutorial, the fourth tutorial, based off of Twisted. So it's to build an IRC bot, and this might sound familiar. The IRC bot is actually based off of Jessamine Smith's work. She built the talkback bot, where if someone in a certain IRC channel were to say, "That's what she said," the bot would respond with a notable quote from a woman, like, "That's what she actually said." Yes. So the purpose for the new coder is to sort of get an introduction on how the internet works, making a portable application and logging, while indirectly being exposed to event-driven programming, IRC protocol testing, and the antiquated means of communication that a lot of engineers use. Of course, software engineering is much more than the internet. So the final tutorial walks new coders through building a GUI with a Sudoku game. With the least amount of hand-holding, this tutorial walks through how to build a game board, as well as how to approach programming the logic that makes Sudoku. The goals for the new coder to take away is a solid understanding of Python's vast standard library, drawing a custom GUI, approaching logic challenges, and testing that logic, while indirectly being exposed to try and accepts, private methods, and user-driven programming. So, because we're in software engineering's industrial revolution, we have to have a revolutionary way of how we learn how to code. We need to learn how to code like we learn how to swim, by doing. So I present to you. As the lifeguarding coach, I advise our Python guppies not to be discouraged. The way we're learning how to code leaves us on the edge of the pool, expecting us to compete after reading a chapter on human hydrodynamics. So try out my swim lessons. Go to my site, newcoder.io, and I want feedback. I want you to contribute. I want you to spread it around and teach others. And don't worry, there's no swim certification necessary. So please don't sink. I want you to swim safely. Thank you.
So we're going to do some questions. There's a microphone here in the middle. If you have a question, please walk up to the microphone so that we can all hear you.
I feel like I should put my sunglasses back on.
So this question is probably answered by your site, but what, if any, level of even base computer familiarity are you assuming with these tutorials?
So in my experience, a lot of folks, they want to learn Python, so I always go, you learn Python the hard way. And they're like, okay, I did that. So now what? So it's basically you don't have to have really anything. I don't expect you to have anything other than understanding Python syntax, like you just came from learn Python the hard way.
Okay.
Come on, grill me.
Thank you for your talk. It was really awesome. I actually can't wait to help some new coders use this. Awesome. But I was curious, these are 5 really awesome tutorials, and I'm wondering how long that took you to put together.
Well, seeing as I'm technically not done yet, it's taken me a long time. It's probably about a full week of work for each one. So this is not a one-off thing for me, and I'm hoping to add more tutorials, maybe on the another first one, so they can choose, or maybe extend one. So, and you're more than welcome to submit stuff too. It's on GitHub.
Hi, thank you. Have you tried using these tutorials in workshops with beginners?
Not yet, but I want to. Okay. But I have some guinea pig friends that have walked through these, and so far so good. I mean, of course, there's going to be typos and errors maybe, but so far they love the language of it. So, and that's what I actually want to do when I go back to San Francisco.
And do you think the tutorials fit in a project night, a few hours, or more than a day?
Probably a few hours. I mean, the way that a lot of workshops I hold is a 2-part thing. a couple hours to like install stuff, because like sometimes Windows takes a full day to get Python and whatnot. I'm sure you all like understand. But yeah, so these could probably be done in like a few hours.
Okay, so we'll propose this list at the next Montreal Python project night. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yay.
So in some of the tutorials you mentioned stuff like interacting with Postgres, some Django early stuff. Does your tutorial cover installing all those necessities?
Yeah, and at the very beginning of each and every tutorial is how to set up your current environment. And so, I mean, you have to like clone everything, but it's just like, yeah, we install Postgres. One difficult thing that I find is some of these libraries need a compiler, and that's kind of hard to explain, and it's kind of hard, and it depends upon their OS and whatnot, so I try and give a lot of information.
You're also covering all 3 popular OSs, or?
I try to, yes. I'm glad that you reminded me, because I have this like full documentation of how to set up Windows, like just like a packet of how to set up Windows. I need to make that public, because that was actually, it turned out well. Sorry, I just want to say a quick story. So I did a workshop a few months ago, and we did the evening of installing everyone, and probably about 90% of people came with Windows machines, and 100% of people had Python and virtual env installed, so it was awesome.
I'd really like to see that. That would be awesome.
Okay, all right, I need to do that. Please bug me if I don't.
So you said it takes about 10 years to go from novice to expert. So as a beginner, how long do you think it takes to go from beginner to novice?
To be honest, I think I'm still like a novice. Well, I mean, I am. A lot of my friends would say so. So maybe about a year, but I'm not sure. It depends upon how much work you want to put into it.
Little. No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. Just kidding.
I'm wondering how we can get involved if we want to help out.
Sure. So if you go to newcoder.io, there's like a GitHub link to the project, and of course pull requests are awesome, and I mean we can have conversations. I mean you're part of PyLadies, and so we can like all help each other out and host them. But I'm welcome to anything and everything contribute-wise. So what do you want to do?
Thanks.
That was not it. That was a rhetorical question.
Well, I wanted to thank you ahead of time, because I came here with basically saying I wasn't going to leave till I knew how to web scrape.
Nice.
And
Score.
I had one night left, so I know what I'm doing tonight.
Nice.
Okay, thank you.
Of course.
I have a question.
Yes.
How do you, because for me sometimes it's hard when you're approaching beginners, and since you have taught workshops and stuff, there's stuff that like it's part of my tool chain every day, and you want to like throw it into beginners because you think it's going to help them, but sometimes it ends up like overwhelming them. So how do you find that balance into like what those things that get you excited but might be like too much for something that's just starting?
Yeah, so I still am quite the noob myself. Other people probably like disagree, but I'm a noob. So I have the point of view of like who would get overwhelmed, or like what would they want to know, and what do they not care about. So yeah, it is a balance, and often I would just like install these 3 things. This is why, in case you want to learn more. But it's always this like, do it. Here's more information.
All right, thanks, Lynn. Was there anything that you found particularly interesting that you learned yourself when you were writing these? I mean, you always talk about what like a novice and noob you are. Anything that stood out?
Goodness, that's a good question. I think I learned that I should probably start running these much further in advance rather than a couple weeks before a conference. Let's see. Well, I mean, I bug my mentors a lot and like what the best language to use is, and I have 1-hour discussions on like the difference between a new and classic style like classes. So I mean, I learned a lot. And I can't even remember. So I'm sorry.
So one of the things that I think new devs have a problem with is this sort of imposter syndrome where you just, you're working on something and you're like, oh, forget it, I don't know what I'm doing. And sort of how you personally have helped new devs get past that, where they're just like, forget it, I'm out. And get them to not leave and to stick around and keep doing.
Yeah, that's definitely important because, I mean, that's how we kind of learn is getting through that frustration and like, you don't get it, but yeah, the way that I do that is appeal with like empathy. It's like I was just here, and I know exactly how you feel, and it's okay that you feel this way because I was just there maybe about 6 months ago. So I mean, it helps to hear people, not just me, but mentors go through that same sort of feeling, and it's just like I'm not the imposter because everyone else here is the same way.
Right.
So,
thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else?
Okay, so I guess, well, if you want to ask Lynn any questions directly, she'll be hanging around this area. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.